best piece of DM advice I've ever received is that you should never ever start your D&D game inside of a tavern.
Get out of here!
I freaking hate that guy. If there's something that the internet has done and really developed in the TTRPG culture, and just every online space for that matter, is that it's turned everything into a cesspool of just simple phrases, empty platitudes, and just removed any level of nuance out of any topic that you could possibly think of. Well, let's think about it, because it's really easy to just make blank statements, and also just to accept that and move on with your life. But what I hate about that is you can just keep throwing these things out, and you just get these blanket statements, these really empty conversations that I just don't have fun with. And one of the phrases that I just really grinds my gears and annoys me the most is the whole idea of, quote unquote, don't start your game in a tavern. 1, don't tell me what to do. 2, why in the world does this advice even exist to begin with? My least favorite part about like a bunch of advice you can find online is it's just a random statement with no explanation of why. It is just words, it is empty, there is no theory, there is no reasoning, it is just blah. It's Bologna. So let's break down this advice. I'm going to argue why starting a campaign in a tavern isn't even that bad, and also why a tavern is such a fantastic tool for explaining your world building, your campaign, your adventure setting, and just like the themes of your world. And if you're unable to make a tavern seem interesting, then that's a skill issue and you'd require some study. Taverns are so rife with opportunities to make interesting things, I cannot imagine not tinkering and just making so many just different aspects of it interesting. So in my classic way of researching, I did a really brief Google search and looked at the first page, and I pulled off a few articles of why people say that you shouldn't, start your game in a tavern. So I've got a Screen Rant article, a CBR article, some Reddit threads, I think a Quora thing, and then also like I think it's a blog post by this page called Hipsters and Dragons. So Screen Rant and CBR, I've never actually read either of these articles or any of their web pages or anything that they've made. The most Screen Rant I've ever gotten is probably just Ryan George and watching his, his pitch meetings before they moved him to his own channel. Either way, both of the articles from CBR and Screen Rant are extremely similar. The main thing that they're focusing on is that it's kind of a bland choice to start in a campaign, and it's also something that's been overused, quote unquote. After reading the Quora answers, a lot of the things I can kind of boil it down to is a lot of people saying that it's a really bad place to add narrative hooks to players, and also if they all meet in a tavern, they aren't necessarily loyal to each other. And based on the few Reddit threads that I ended up reading on this, it's pretty much people saying that it's, again, bad for narrative hooks, and also a really bad place to give characters characterization. The Hipsters and Dragons blog post actually goes into a few things about why people think it's like uninspired, but the thing that I really like about the article is it starts to get into why taverns are actually so commonly used and why it's kind of good. I'll get into that in a moment, but let me just very quickly break down this basic complaint list about taverns real quick. 1, it's uninspired, it's boring, it's cliche. I dislike the notion that because something has been done before, it's not worth trying to do it yourself.
Though. As are sunsets and rainbows, you viper.
Have you no whimsy in your heart that a tavern does not wisp you away into a world of magic and wonder? Is a sunset just the sun because you've seen it before? Is a rainbow just light waves? Is squirt just piss? Open your mind to the world and realize that because things have been repeated, and also that you can just, state them plainly, doesn't make them any less interesting or inspired. I don't agree that things are boring just because they tread similar waters. All things created were built upon things from the past or something else that someone else had been inspired by at some point. Lion King is just Hamlet. Red Dead did not invent cowboys. Frieren is literally an immortal elf mage, and she might be one of the most compelling characters I've witnessed in anime in the last 15 years. The original Star Wars, or Episode 4 now, is literally the quintessential hero story. Creativity is fueled by the things that you have consumed and seen before you. If you have been inspired by watching Lord of the Rings and everyone meets Strider/Aragorn in the Prancing Pony for the first time, then go for that. Let that inspire you. Make a tavern. Never deny the chance for your inspiration to shine. Also, I really genuinely believe that even if concepts don't seem interesting to you, a lot of the times there are exceptions. You can do things, even in genres that you don't like, that you might find interesting. For example, I don't like theater, I don't like musicals, but I really love Shrek the Musical. If you don't enjoy taverns as a concept or find them boring, perhaps you just never either experienced a tavern that you found interesting or you've never created one that you found interesting. So it sounds really reductive to say that essentially if you haven't had an interesting, tavern, then make an interesting tavern. And if you can't, skill issue. 2, there's no narrative purpose, no loyalty, etc. I don't personally think that adventurers have to be buddy-buddy the very first time they meet. They don't need to have like a similar plotline. It does depend on your campaign, of course, but you don't need to have them all be loyal to each other or even serving the same quest by session 1. This is partly because I think that people put a standard on like the live play shows that they've seen that are designed to entertain people. You don't need to have your first session, hook anyone other than your players. If your players are having fun, that's all they really need. You don't need to throw in this big narrative hook that's supposed to, kind of engage an audience if there's no real audience other than the people at your table. And then also, I get that it's not like as important as like a missive from the king or, like some kind of quest of revenge that gets all these players involved. But it can still be done. Not every D&D adventure has to be very grand. A lot of them are intimate. They can be in small towns. And a tavern is a really good place where people just do a little bickering, do a bar fight. Even as cliche as that is, I think it's fun. I also don't really agree with the idea that a tavern's a bad place to kind of characterize your characters. I think a tavern actually does a really good job of showing a character's values, perhaps how much they drink, if they abstain, who do they talk to, do they sit alone, are they trying to get information? You can do a lot with a tavern if you are just a little bit creative with it, and you can really characterize people all in those little scenes. Also, when people drink, they, I've heard it be called like liquid courage. People will kind of show a lot more sides of themselves that can kind of be played off in future sessions. I don't really know, I've never drank, but I think it's something that you can play off with. I don't think that a tavern is inherently a bad place to start a campaign or even give a narrative hook to your players. I think you would have just as hard of a time going into an empty field or into a forest or into like the town square. All of those places don't necessarily have any narrative hook tied to that location. If you are creative and do your job as a DM, any single place could be a narrative hook. You could add a narrative hook there. A tavern is not the problem, creativity is. So how do you actually make taverns that are interesting? Well, I'd focus on what taverns are actually good at. Let's refer back to that Hipsters and Dragons post. Taverns are an incredible place to get a lot of world building off to your players, while also being an incredible hub for like people to gather. It's a region where a lot of people go, making it an incredible source of information. There's no social media, there's no Twitter, there's no YouTube journalist who's going to tell you everything you need to know and how you need to feel about the world. So you go to where everyone is gathering for food and drink and for their social life. And you get all the information there because that's where people are. It's a great place for any businesses to advertise to, that kind of thing. You immediately just get so much information by starting around a tavern. You get to know the values of people who are traveling through this area and who are stopping by this tavern, and also who the locals are, because taverns are gathering places of people. And through those people, you can get conversations of the land, and you can overhear the conversations, use some perception rolls, get to know what the values of the people here are, like what's the happenings. They're gossiping, they're talking about the troubles of their lives. You get world building with that. Also, just by hearing all these things and seeing the people pass by and just the level of wealth within the tavern, you get an idea of how the people here are living. You get what kind of leisure activities people like to do in this city. It could be just like drinking and eating like a basic tavern, or maybe they have activities in the tavern. They could have other things going on. And you can also get just like what kind of food this region serves. I've talked about it in my food and world building video, but just like what regional foods this place has and what kind of crops they value. That's important to me, at least to me, okay? Is this tavern particularly interesting to me? No, not really. This is like the unseasoned chicken breast of the fantasy genre, but just like an unseasoned chicken breast, I see a blank canvas of opportunities at which you can make anything and flavor to however desired that you'd like. I offer you this question: if you're ever faced with something that you find boring and that you aren't considering including, if you find it boring, why not just make it interesting? And in caveman speak, if boring, why not better? Like, dude, throw some sauce on it and you'll have something just 30 times better than the bland tavern everyone else has in their mind. If you need someone to really put it into words, essentially just Put enough detail and enough effort into a tavern that it sticks out in your players' minds. So add some kind of interesting gimmick to the tavern. If your city has a very specific theming and some kind of look to it, perhaps the tavern has a slightly different look to it that goes against the grain. Contrast is key. It could have just a crazy design. It could be shaped like a boot or a hat, or have a crazy color that stands out. Perhaps it's pink inside of a place that's only millennial gray everywhere else, you know? It could have a silly name. It's called the Hat Trick, and every single one of the employees wears a silly hat, and they're all different and they're all unique. Maybe the staff has like a certain cheer that they do whenever something happens in the store. You ever go to like a Japanese restaurant and everyone yells at you as you walk in through the door? Something like that. Or perhaps they have like a prank that they pull on people who aren't locals, who are like traveling through. Maybe it's something as simple as like, you have to have a hat to enter in. I don't know why I'm so focused on hats, but like something like that, a small little prank could be something that characterizes your characters. If you're worried about that characterization thing, you're adding like a small, very minor like problem in front of them that they have to solve that's kind of inconsequential and gets them to understand parts of a world. Add entertainment to your tavern. What I mean by that is like show the values of what the people are doing here, because it's a hub where people gather, so they're going to want to be entertained in some way or another. It shouldn't just be the lone bard playing some bardcore cover that you found on Spotify on a bardcore playlist that someone else put together. You know, do something. It could be burlesque. Someone's maybe doing a live comedy show. Maybe it's like a quiz night. Anything of that nature, you know, stand-up comedy, jokes, improv, whatever. It could be a gambling house. Do something that makes this particular place stand out, and you can kind of get your players to understand the values of the people around a lot better. Then of course you want to fill this tavern with as many interesting characters as you can. Most of D&D is really carried by having the chance to, one, roleplay, and also just like meet silly, colorful, weird little dudes. So don't just put in random tavern goer number 1, you do the extremes of whatever society is here, because you're in like a collective place. You're gonna get someone who's extremely on one side and extremely on the other side, and that's gonna be interesting. So whatever you do, just don't write orc patron number 1, give them some personality. Okay, so in the end, do you really have to do a tavern start to your game? No, not really. Do you have to make interesting taverns in your world? No, not really. It doesn't really matter at all. I think it's just interesting to take kind of like bland advice that people throw out online and just like kind of being like, 1, no, don't tell me what to do, and 2, take that and just kind of see why people are saying the things that they do and see if you can kind of turn on its head a little bit. Anyways, I just think that dismissing like an entire area or genre of place and calling them boring or bland or cliche, it's just kind of like, whatever, not great advice. I don't really care about it. And honestly, just like, I don't think that it's cool to dismiss all of that, because there's a lot of cool ideas it can do if you just turn it on its head. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. I know that this has had a little bit of a different energy. I've had a few Dr. Peppers, but please let me know if you have any experience where like a tavern that really stuck out in your head. I would love to hear about it. But thank you so much for watching. I will see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.